Boker Tov, good morning everybody. Thank you so much for joining us now at 9:30, right here in Rechavia Nachlaot and Yerushalayim. We are about to complete the entire Maamar of VeYadaata, Tafresh Nun Zayin, that was said in 57, which is 1897. We've been learning this Maamar for approximately 2 months now, ever since the Chagim. And it is very special that we are learning the final Shiur now together, the final paragraph. So if you have the original text, please look at the middle of page Nun Tet, and then Be'ezrat Hashem, we will jump right into the Maamar. As we said when we started the entire Maamar, we said that the way the usual Maamar is designed, that we have a verse, a pasuk, usually associated with the parsha of the week in which it was said. And then we have a bunch of questions on that. Then we have a long explanation. And then at the end, we wrap things up. So now we are going to start wrapping things up. First, we're going to wrap up the second half of the Maamar. Then we're going to go backwards and wrap up the beginning of the Maamar. In other words, the more explanations we have, the more answers to the questions that we have, we're able to hopefully clarify earlier questions that were asked. So one of the questions that we asked in the middle of the Maamar was about the Dor HaFlaga, the generation that wanted to build a tower and wage war against Hashem. And they said, "V'na'asa lanu shem," let's make for ourselves a name. And we mentioned that name, shem, is avodah zarah, is idol worship. So according to this, we'll understand Masha Katuv, what we said earlier, the Dor HaFlaga, with the generation that wanted to build the tower, V'nas alanu shem, and we should make for ourselves a quote unquote name. V'amra Zal, and our sages told us, Ein shem el avodah zarah. Shem means idol worship. Shezeh haya chet Dor HaFlaga. This is the sin of that generation. Shehifridu, they tried to separate et Hashem Elokim mishem Havaya, the name of Elokim from Shem Havaya. In other words, they wanted the materialistic world to be an entity, to be a true entity, and in essence, it's not. It cannot be. They would consider the intermediaries to be the main part. And this is idol worship, at least on a refined level. And behold, we said earlier that the neshamot, the individuals who were in Mitzrayim and they came out of Mitzrayim, they were the same neshamot from the generation of the Haflaga that wanted to build the tower against Hashem. So why does an neshama come back down? In order to fix, to correct, tikkun, to do a tikkun for things that may have been done and not fixed in a previous generation. So the generations of the neshamot of the generation of the Haflaga needed to correct and fix a problem that they did, which they served avodah zarah, at least on a deep level, at least on a spiritual level, even if not physically. So therefore, the neshamos of the generation that went out of Mitzrayim, they had to serve slave labor for Paro and the Mitzrayim and the Egyptians. The Chomer uvilveinim letaken et achet devayihi lahem halavena le'even. They had to work hard to make lime and bricks in order to fix the problem. A similar wording that happened by the Dor HaFlaga, by the generation of those that tried to build the tower against Hashem, which also Vayihi lahem halavena le'even, they had to build this tower. So they mixed the lime and the cement in order to build the bricks and to build this great tower. As is explained elsewhere, this concept at great length, and through working hard in Mitzrayim, So what happens? They, in the generation that left Mitzrayim, first they had to work slave labor. For at least 190 years, overall 210 years. Then they had to go out of Mitzrayim. And then they saw godliness. Wow, they saw a great level of godliness in a very obvious level, which basically translates to mean, what does it mean to see Hashem in this world? That instead of separating Havaya and Elokim, instead of magnifying the Elokim, magnifying the intermediary, by merging Havaya and Elokim, we'll hopefully have a revelation of Havaya within this world. That is through realizing that Elokim and the angels and all of the other fortunes and galaxies, all of the above are not really covering over godliness, but rather they're only a tool through which Hashem's greatness can be obvious in this world. So you see the link. Dor Haflaga, the generation of the Haflaga, then the generation of the working in Mitzrayim, going out of Mitzrayim, and seeing godliness. V'hainu, and that means ha'otot v'hamuftim de Mitzrayim, the signs and the wonders in Mitzrayim, ba'asara makot kriyat yam, so for the 10 plagues and splitting the sea, shenitgala lemata, which became revealed below, gilui otot umuftim yotzim midarkei hateva, the revelation of the signs and the wonders out of nature, totally above nature. So they saw revelation of godliness higher than Teva. And we said earlier that HaTeva is the numerical value of Elokim. So if you want to have a revelation of higher than Teva, higher than nature, then you need to bring in Havaya into this world. And that's our goal. And if, God forbid, the name of Elokim would truly be a concealment, al Shem Havaya, over the Shem Havaya, how would you ever expect for there to be a revelation of godliness higher than nature down here? That's why. The answer is because really the Shem Elokim does not truly conceal over Shem Havaya. So if you do that VeYadaata Hashem properly, then you'll be able to succeed in bringing the revelation of Hashem down here. And this is what our sages teach us in the Talmud Sanhedrin, page 39, side 1. Amar lehahu minala Maamar. There was a certain Apikoros, someone who denied Hashem's existence, said to Maamar, the great tzaddik, he tried to indicate, as Tosfot says, we'll see in a second, he tried to bring out to Maamar that he didn't say there's no God. He said that God is not related to the world. And that is definitely a form of avodah zarah, of idol worship. We're not allowed to think that there are two different controllers, two different governships. We have Hashem that governs the above, and down here we have our own show. And that's what he tried to say was Azav Hashem et Aretz, that Hashem, God forbid, left the land in the hands of the stars and the galaxies. And only Hashem, His honor is only above. Avalamata, he tried to say down here, the sources of the hashpa'ah, of the inspiration and blessing for are the fortune and galaxies shehen mastirim chas v'shalom ala lekut, which God forbid cover over godliness. Kain haya dat hakozevet shalamin. This was the forged opinion of this individual who denied that Hashem is related to the world. Amarle, so Maamar told him, how is it possible that Hurman, the one that is in charge of the physical world, how did he allow the higher realm to pass water through the water, through the earth. V'hainu, what does that mean? Shelafi da'atama kozevet, through the other opinion, which is a lie, which is foolish. Sha'amamutzaim masirim be'emet chas v'shalom, and intermediaries truly do conceal over godliness. How could you have maya, water? How could you have godliness come into the world? In other words, even the Apikoros agreed that occasionally there is revelation of godliness. If so, that if there are two different governorships over the higher worlds and lower worlds, then how can you ever have once in a while an obvious revelation of Hashem in the world? So that proves that it's all one. All we need to do is, quote unquote, all we need to do is to indicate and show and really knock into our minds that Elokim and all of the intermediaries are really not a true existence. The only true existence is Havaya, Shem Havaya by himself, the essence of Hashem. When and where is one of the examples of what we had G-dly Elokut, revelation of Hashem? We saw clearly clear revelation of Hashem right here in the world below. So they saw clearly Am Yisrael standing there by the Amsuf, by the Sea of Reeds. And before then, even just going out of Mitzrayim, they were able to see godliness. So they themselves saw how Hashem, the name Elokim, does not conceal of Hashem Havaya. V'Havaya v'Elokim kula chad mamash. And name of Havaya and name of Elokim is all one literally. And there is really no concealment over Hashem Havaya. Now that we've understood this, now we could go back all the way to the beginning of the Maamar. We talked about the idea of VeYadaata hayom, you should know today, v'hashevota levavecha, and take to heart. Number one, we explained very well, the Rebbe Rashab explained very well how it's possible to occur to us that Havaya and Elokim is all one. But the Rebbe Rashab mentioned an interesting point, that in the couple of verses preceding VeYadaata hayom, you have the subject of going into Eretz Yisrael, and of course Yetziat Mitzrayim. So the part of the Yetziat Mitzrayim, now that we explained about the Dor HaFlaga, the generation of those that wanted to build the tower, now we understand why we have the Yetziat Mitzrayim before the subject of VeYadaata, about name of Havaya and Elokim. Because the concept of Yetziat Mitzrayim is going out of our limitations. What's a classical example of limitations? Elokim. That's a limitation of being able to say that really there's a limitation of, we can't really have revelation of godliness because we have this limitation and this thing which disturbs us from serving Hashem. But once you have Gilui Shem Havaya, you have Hashem shining through the world, then there are no limitations anymore. That's Yetziat Mitzrayim, the exodus of Mitzrayim, of Egypt. Now we're going to understand also the idea of going into Eretz Yisrael. How the idea of Eretz Yisrael, based on what we talked about a couple of days ago, also relates to this subject. The third line of page Samech, Ukemo Kain, and so too, B'knisat Haaretz, going into Eretz Yisrael. Nir'eh yoter, we see clearly, Inyan Yichud Havaya v'Elokim, the concept of unification of Havaya and Elokim. Shaharei nitbar la'el, for we said earlier, the Yisrael sheb'chutz la'aretz ovdei avodah zara b'tarahein, that those Jews that live in the diaspora, it's almost as if they're serving idols, just b'tara, in a pure way, so to say, quote unquote. Harei dafka b'chutz la'aretz. So we see from here that specifically in the diaspora, mepnei sheb'chutz la'aretz nimshechet hashefa ve'or Eloki. Since in chutz la'aretz, the shefa, the light of Hashem, comes down al yidei levushe asiyah, through the garments of asiyah, of practicality, shehem mastirim ma'od, which really conceal over Hashem, over the light of Hashem, kanal, as we said earlier. Aval be'eretz Yisrael, but right here in Eretz Yisrael, nimshechet hashpa'al yidei levushe hayitzira, that we also have garments, we also have concealments, but they're a much more refined level of concealment. They're from the level of Yetzirah, of formation. The hester, the concealment, is not that great. And therefore, it's even clearer over there how Havaya and Elokim are all one. And that's something which you have to say is something which is very special, a great zechut to be here in Eretz Yisrael, to be here on shlichut and do emissary work of the Rebbe right here, right over here. Because you see over here in Eretz Yisrael much more than in the entire world, how Hashem's hand is right here, as the Torah itself says, that Einei Hashem Elokecha ba. The eyes of Hashem are here, Mereishis Hashana, from the beginning of the year, V'yad Achar Hashana, until the end of the year. So you see how Hashem's hashgacha, Hashem's management and governorship over here in Eretz Yisrael is much greater and clearer than in the rest of the world. And it's known that just like we have Eretz Yisrael in the materialistic realm, so too Yesh Eretz Yisrael b'ruchaniyut. We also have Eretz Yisrael in the spiritual realm. What is that? Maseh mitzvot, the deed of the mitzvah. So every time we do a mitzvah, regardless where we are in the world, that brings us to Israel. That means that we are in Eretz Yisrael, at least on a spiritual level. It's almost like one of the Chasidim of the Tzemach Tzedek came to him and asked him for a bracha to go to Eretz Yisrael. But the Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe of Chabad, realized that it was not necessarily his avoda at that time to go to Eretz Yisrael. So he told him a statement in Yiddish. It's very short. Mach da Eretz Yisrael. Make here Israel. People in Eretz Yisrael don't like to hear this story so much because you want people to come to Eretz Yisrael. But the message is true. The message is very, very strong, very powerful. Even when a person is not in Eretz Yisrael, we still need to be in an atmosphere of Eretz Yisrael. Bezrat Hashem, Mashiach will come immediately, and all of Am Yisrael from this generation, and all of Am Yisrael from all generations will be here. But in the last final moments of the galut, of the exile, at least when one is in Chutz La'aretz, we need to experience Eretz Yisrael there too, and bring Eretz Yisrael to the entire world. Because that's exactly what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. All of Am Yisrael is going to come here to Eretz Yisrael, and then Eretz Yisrael will spread to the three major countries, Keni, Knizi, and Kadmoni, and then Eretz Yisrael will be the entire world. And that's really the goal. The Eretz Hulashon Ratzon. What does it mean, Eretz? Eretz is three Hebrew letters. Aleph, Reish, Tzadik, final Tzadik. If you take the two last letters, Reish, Tzadik, Reish, Tzadik is from the word Ratzon. Reish, Tzadik, Vav, Nun, Nun Sofit. And so, Eretz means to do. Obviously, when you're here in Eretz Yisrael, you have more of an urge to do Hashem's will. But if you fulfill Hashem's will also outside of Eretz Yisrael, you're basically experiencing Eretz Yisrael, Ratzon, the will of Hashem. U'kamayim Razal, as our sages teach us, Lama Nikra Shema Eretz. Why is Eretz Yisrael called Eretz? Sheratzta la'asot Ratzon Kona, because it wants to do the will of its Creator. In service of Hashem, what does it mean, Ratzon? To fulfill the will of Hashem, even if we don't understand it. The fact itself that it's the will of Hashem, that itself gives us an ability to be able to connect to Eretz Yisrael. Through observing mitzvot, with accepting upon ourselves the yoke of Hashem, a person will come to the knowledge that Hashem and Elokim, the name of Havaya and the name of Elokim of Hashem, are all one. Because once a person does Hashem's will, so he doesn't allow any obstacles to get in the way. And there's hopefully a revelation of Hashem. Here are the final 2.5 lines of this Maamar, and this is a siyum. Now we are completing this entire Maamar. This is beautiful. Therefore, before we have the pasuk VeYadaata, we have the concept of going out of Mitzrayim, going out of Egypt, and entering Eretz Yisrael. Lepasuk, before the verse, VeYadaata hayom. For through going out of Mitzrayim and going into Eretz Yisrael, we come to the knowledge. It helps us come closer to the knowledge that Havaya is Elokim. It's really one. There's no, God forbid, two. It's really one. Hainu liyachid Havaya Elokim. That means to unify Havaya and Elokim. Ech Havaya Elokim kula chad mamash. How Havaya and Elokim is literally one, and that's exactly what the Zohar says. Not only Havaya Elokim, that it's chadam mamash is literally one thing. Now that we've learned this amazing Maamar from the Rebbe Rashab, we hopefully realize that everything in the world is really Havaya. It's really Hashem. It's a question of peeling away the peels of all of the external matters and obstacles that try to hold us back, help us, that try to make us refrain from seeing revelation of Hashem. And then we're able to see how really Havaya and Elokim is all one. I want to finish off with one beautiful anecdote, that this Maamar is called VeYadaata Moskva. The VeYadaata literally means VeYadaata, that was said in Moscow. Moskva in Yiddish, and I guess in Russian is Moskva, Moscow. And so this is the only Maamar that when you have a phrase, a slang, how to refer to this Maamar, the Maamar is we say VeYadaata, the first word of the Maamar of the discourse, and also where it's said. Now, in many Maamarim, it says on the top, right before you start the Maamar, where it was said. But we don't really call it VeYadaata Moskva, but it became sort of self-understood that this Maamar was said in Moscow. And so the explanation for that is because that's the whole idea of the Maamar. The Maamar is here to explain how Moscow, the great city, in those days, of course, the great city of Moscow is really all part of Havaya, is really all part of Hashem. So when you look around, you look at the world, you look at any great city, and you think, one can think, that really this is, God forbid, separate from Havaya. But once you learn the Maamar, this very Maamar of VeYadaata, you realize that even if you look at Moscow, or even if you look at any other great city in the world, New York City, whatever it is, and you see all the major buildings and businesses, and you can get lost, and a person can, God forbid, think that it's separated from Hashem, now you learn the Maamar and you realize that it's all one with Hashem. Havaya v'Elokim kulachad. Havaya and Elokim is all one, mamish, literally. Thank you so much for joining us, learning this amazing Maamar together. And Bezrat Hashem, I look forward to learning together with you many more Maamarim and Chasidus and Chasidic insights, Bezrat Hashem, for many happy and healthy years to come. Shalom, shalom.